Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to the Netherlands once again, and we're going to have a look at yet another of the beers that I brought back with me from my recent trip down there. So for this one, we are returning to a brewery that has featured on the channel once before. The last beer that I had from these guys was really nice, but very, very interesting and quirky, I have to say as well. This one is supposed to be very good, and I think we can safely say that this one is potentially a little bit more kind of conventional than that last beer that we had. So very curious to see how it turns out. Hopefully it's another good beer, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review we will head to a little place called Holes in Zuid-Beveland, which is in the southwest of the Netherlands, quite close to Middelburg actually, and we're going to have a look at my second beer from Brouwerij Emelisse. So this particular beer is called the 15th Anniversary Imperial Russian Stout. This one is the Kilchoman Islay Whiskey Barrel Aged Edition. It comes in at 15% ABV, and you already know what style it is. So yeah, really curious to see what this one has in store for us. The last beer we had was one of the White Label series, and that was a barley wine that came in, I think it was about 11% or so, that one, if I remember rightly, and it was aged in Bowmore whiskey barrels and had this really interesting kind of smoky character to it. This one though seems a little bit more conventional. It does seem though at Brouwerij Emelisse they enjoy their Scotch whisky barrels, but yeah, Kilchoman is a distillery that I am fairly familiar with. So they're from Islay. We actually had an event at Aberdeen University in the Whisky Society where someone from Kilchoman came to the university and gave us a guided tasting of the whisky, which was really quite nice. And I remember it being quite a citrusy whisky, but at the same time it still had a little bit of that kind of trademark peated smoke that you expect of an Islay whisky. So yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that translates into this big Russian Imperial Stout. But yeah, this beer was bought at De Bierwinkel in Leiden in the Netherlands. I think I paid about €7.50 for this one. So that translates to roughly about just shy of £7 sterling, and maybe somewhere in the region of $8.50 American for those of you watching over there. But De Bierwinkel is an awesome beer shop. Peter, who runs it, is a lovely, lovely guy. He's got a great selection of stuff, both Dutch and Belgian, and there's lots of other kind of foreign things in there as well. So definitely worth checking out if you find yourself in Leiden, and you know, if you're in the Amsterdam or Den Haag area, take the train to Leiden. Beautiful, beautiful little town actually. So yeah, very, very curious to see what this one has in store for us, and let's crack on then. So as always with my Dutch reviews, a massive shout out to my friends in the Dutch Beer Collective. We have Thomas Opent, Thomas Hoendam, my lover. We have Remy Den Dupe, who is Beer Geek Holland, the OG Dutch beer tuber. We have Herben Caspers, who is Dutch Beer Geek, the Black IPA Slag as we call him, and then we've got Douglas Kesselmans, who is Beers with Douglas, and he's the newest addition to the group and the most gangster of them all. But lovely, lovely guys. All four of them are doing some lovely reviews. So what I'll do, as always, is put the link to the Facebook and Instagram page of the Dutch Beer Collective. Go and check them out, give them a like and subscribe and things like this, and show them some love. They're all doing some really, really nice things. And as I've told you in previous reviews, the standard of Dutch craft beer is very high these days, and they'll keep you up to date with it a little bit more than I can up here in Scandinavia, of course. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Brouwerij Emelisse before, and hopefully we can get a few more of their beers to review at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Dutch beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to quite regularly at the moment because I still have a couple of Dutch beers left, and I'm sure we'll get a top up from the Dutch guys at some point in the future. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely, hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Brouwerij Emelisse then, on to my brewery notes. So Brouwerij Emelisse, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Hols in Zuid-Beveland in the southwest of the Netherlands, quite close to Middelburg, and the company was founded back in 2004, and it takes its name from the village of Emelisse, which was one of the 12 historic villages that made up present-day Zuid-Beveland. So Frey Buizje, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, I apologise if not, is one of the original founders and had been a hobby brewer, home brewer, for a number of years. But in the late 1990s, he started brewing a beer called Emelisse Abdebeer at the Schelde Brouwerij down in Belgium. But in September of 1998, the Emelisse Foundation was formed with the idea of promoting Zuid-Beveland and just as a region, I guess, if you like. And one of the goals was to produce a beer using the local barley. And this was initially brewed at the Halfman Brewery in Hulst down in Belgium, of course, as well. But in 2004, Brouwerij Emelisse was officially founded, and they built their own brewery in Kamperland in 2005, and it opened in October of that year. But this premises was combined with a restaurant to make it profitable, and the brewery was installed with 2 copper 1,000 litre kettles and tanks with a 16,000 litre fermentation capacity. So Peter van den Eyden came in as the head brewer, and he also brewed his own beers under the name Schelde Brouwerij until 2007, and then Kees Buberman joined the company as the brewmaster, having come from a background as a chef and also as a home brewer. But the brewery had a lot of success, and it began to export their beers abroad in 2010, at which time they also began to brew some of their beers at the Proefbrouwerij in Locriste near Ghent down in Belgium. But Kees Buberman left the brewery in 2015 to found his own brewery, Brouwerij Kees, definitely worth checking out, of course, as well. And then the following year, John de Vries took over for a short time as the head brewer. In 2016, though, the brewing was taken over by the Slot Oostende brewery in Hols, and production in the Kamperland brewery stopped completely in 2017, although this premises remains as a restaurant, which is called Restaurant Emelisse. But the current brewmaster is Jens van Stee, and as of June 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 60 different kinds of beer, according to Untappd. So, yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Brouwerij Emelisse for the moment. I have heard of this brewery. I've known about this brewery for quite a long time, but the last review I did from these guys, which was a beer that just appeared in Systembolaget, that was the first opportunity that I'd had to actually come across some of their beers other than this one. So yeah, this is a brewery that has been around for a long time. They're very well respected from what I gather, and they've got a really interesting barrel aging program as well. They seem to be a big fan of their Scotch whisky barrels. So yeah, I'll need to have a look and see what else I can get from them. Maybe I can do a direct order from this brewery and get a couple of different things. Otherwise, I'll ask some of the guys in the Dutch Beer Collective to gather me up a few things and we'll do a swap or something. But yeah, very interesting brewery. And this is my second beer from them. The last one, as I mentioned earlier, was one of the White Label series, a Bowmore barrel-aged barley wine, which was very good. So yeah, that's it. That's all I can really tell you about Brouwerij Emelisse for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. As you can see, quite straight shooting as the last beer was that we had from these guys in terms of its artwork. You can see just on the top of the bottle there is the Emelisse symbol, but you'll probably see it better on the bottle cap here. But yeah, 330 milliliter bottle, this one, sorry. And the beer itself apparently has been aged over the Kilchoman whiskey barrels, or in the Kilchoman whiskey barrels, I should say. My English is terrible these days. But yeah, for 15 weeks, obviously. So that is quite interesting, I have to say. I'm really curious to see what flavours the Kilchoman barrels are going to give this. But yeah, at 15%, this beer is going to be a beast even without the barrel aging. So yeah, I think it's about time that we crack this one open and see how we go. But happy 15th anniversary to Brouwerij Emelisse, albeit at the time I'm reviewing this beer, it's a little bit belated, but what can we do? What can we do about that? Yeah, so as we open the beer up, a little bit of smoke on the opening, of course, and we'll get it out and into the glass. There we are. This, I think, is going to be an absolute monster of a beer. But yeah, the Bowmore whiskey barrels, they gave a really interesting kind of peaty smokiness to the barley wine. That beer was very much an acquired taste, as I said in the review at the time. But yeah, it's definitely, that one was definitely worth checking out for sure. But yeah, let me just line this up again for you so that my OCD is happy, and now we can focus on the beer itself. So before the head disappears completely, you could see that it poured with less than a quarter finger of a frothy, I would say kind of medium, light to medium beige head on that. That has of course faded away to be pretty much nothing, which you would kind of expect from a big 15% Imperial Stout, so nothing really surprising there. But yeah, it certainly looks good, this beer. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, or the surface I guess we should call it, because there's not much of a head to it. But yeah, it certainly looks the part. In terms of colour, if we shine the light through this one, it is pretty damn dark. You know, you get a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola chestnutty coloured edge to the beer when you shine the light through it, which is to be expected from an Imperial Stout. But yeah, pretty much a dark ebony rosewood, black as night type colour, this one. But yeah, when it comes to the colour of your beers, remember it's determined by 1, the type of malts that you use, that determines the magnitude of the colour, 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour of beer. And then adjuncts and barrel aging will also play a role in that as well. But when it comes to a big Imperial Stout like this, to be quite honest, I don't think that is going to make too much of a difference to something that is this colour, to be honest with you. But in terms of an Imperial Stout, it certainly looks the part, and I don't think there's too much else we can say about the appearance of this one. It really looks the part of a big 15% Russian Imperial Scotch barrel aged whiskey stout. So yeah, this one looks very, very nice. So yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we got on with this one. Oh, ho, ho. You can smell that Kilchoman in there right away. Yeah. You know, I've said this in other reviews as well. Kilchoman and Islay whiskey, I think generally, Islay whiskey has a real, you know, it really has a real pungency to it. But generally speaking, I think Scotch whiskey barrels, you have to be quite careful with them if you use them for aging, because the flavours you get out of Scottish whiskey barrels are a lot more kind of pungent and dominant, if you like, compared to what you would get from the American bourbon barrels. You know, got this fact from my friend Thomas Open that I mentioned earlier. Bourbon barrels can only be used once, so there's a huge excess of bourbon barrels across the world. That's why bourbon barrel aging is so popular. Of course, Scotch whiskey barrels are a little bit rarer, right enough, but when you use them, you do have to be careful, because they can give beer they can give like huge, very potent flavours and aromas into beers like this, and you can smell this right away with this one, with just the sheer whiskey notes that come out of this beer. And that was the same with the white label barley wine, the Bowmore one that we had last time round. But for me, it's a little bit of nostalgia. For some others, this might be a kind of acquired taste, but there's been a few different editions of this beer from what I understand. I think they had the original one, they did have a bourbon barrel-aged version, and I think there might have been a few other barrel-aged versions of this, come to think of it. But yeah, this is just the one. I think they only had the one actually in De Beerwinkel, when I remember rightly, and I just asked Peter to pick me out something that he recommended, and he thought this would be good. And he's given me some pretty good beers, so we're going to listen. That's the thing, if you go to De Beerwinkel, listen to Peter, because he knows his stuff. But yeah, this is awesome. The whiskey barrel notes you get out of this are just such a nostalgia hit. But like I say, for some people, it's it might be a little bit of an acquired taste, if you like, but for me, it's you know, it's right up my street. But anyway, let's try and break this down for you a little bit then. So you can definitely smell that kind of woody backbone to the beer. Of course, compared to American bourbon, Scotch whiskey is definitely a bit more grainy, a little bit more kind of almost spicy in a sense, I guess we could say, and definitely a wee bit drier. And it's not quite as brown sugary, it's not quite as sweet, I guess we could say. And you can kind of smell that with the wood in this beer as well. So you can smell that sort of smooth woody undertone to it. It's definitely got a few kind of leathery elements to it on the barrel aging side of things as well. There's a wee bit of there is a wee teeny hint of a kind of nuttiness in there, but I think that's quite sort of minimal, to be honest with you. But you do get that very light, peaty, smoky character that is a characteristic of Kilchoman, as I said earlier on. If I remember rightly, Kilchoman is actually one of the few independent distilleries that we still have in Scotland. Quite a few of them are tied, or most of them are tied to the big conglomerates these days, but Kilchoman, I'm sure, is still independently owned, which is great. I wish we had more of that. But yeah, the peaty notes that you get out of this one are really nice and very subtle, actually. So yeah, that's pretty cool. But one of the things that you should note about peated malt compared to, for example, German Rauch malt, is that the peated malts that you have in Scotland, it's got a kind of earthiness to it. It's got a little bit of grassiness as well, compared to the more meaty thing that you'll get from the Bamberg Rauch malts. So that kind of gives, to me, it gives the backbone of the beer a little bit of a kind of leathery type vibe, which is kind of interesting. So you get that earthiness, you get a little bit of a leathery character, that smooth kind of wood, and a wee bit of that peaty smokiness in there, and one or two little nutty qualities. And we're only talking about the barrel aging component of this beer for the moment as well. So yeah, it smells absolutely lovely, this one. But as I say, with Scotch barrels, they are always going to dominate the aroma and the flavour to a degree as well. And I've got a feeling, just from the way the aroma is going in this one, I think the barrel aging is going to be very forward on this beer with the flavour. But yeah, let's try and focus on the malty and hoppy components of the beer. So for me, this one, it's quite... it's got a big sort of oily kind of chocolatey note that sits on top of it as well, but the chocolate doesn't smell too thick in a sense. It kind of comes across as being a little bit slicker. You can smell that it's quite a high cocoa chocolate in this one, you know, a sort of 60-70% kind of cocoa. There are one or two little milky chocolate elements in there as well, in fairness, but all of this sits on top of the barrel aging. I do get a little hint of vanilla out of the beer. And yeah, a little bit of a milkier chocolate, but yeah, the darker chocolate is the kind of more dominant thing in there. But it's quite hard to pick out these aromas. The malt really comes across as a lot more subtle, just because of how powerful and pungent the barrel aging elements are in the aroma here. But on the malty side of things, there's definitely, you can smell a bit of that kind of treacle molasses type quality. And when you've got a big beer like this, you know, this is probably going to have, you know, a 5-6 hour wort boil or something like that. So you're going to get a lot of caramelization of the sugars. So it makes sense that there's a little bit of a kind of treacly molasses type thing to this. And you can definitely smell that in the middle of the nose. And it comes across as very slick and oily. It's not coming across as, you know, kind of toasty or anything like this. And there's not really a kind of sweeter caramel element to it, but you can smell that big, viscous, brown sugary note in the middle of the nose there. But I think the kind of peaty, smoky character takes away a little bit from the sweetness of that. So the aroma of this is really interesting in a lot of ways. I'm curious to see how it's going to come across in the actual flavour, of course. But on the hoppy side of things, there's a wee bit going on in this one. When it's been barrel aged, of course, and I've had the beer sitting for a couple of months now. Remember, the hoppy character is going to drop out of it, but it definitely has a wee bit of earthiness at the back of the nose. You can pick up a few kind of floral notes to the beer as well, not too much, and then there's a little bit of a kind of grassiness to it as well. And some of the grassiness actually does linger about a little bit in this beer, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, there is a wee bit of a green component to this one, but yeah, in a big imperial stout like this, you are expecting more of a kind of a malt forward beer. And of course, when we've got barrel aging in there as well, it comes across as very infused. But yeah, definitely a little bit of a very slightly citrusy, grassy note to it. But on the fruity side of things, it's got a wee bit of a kind of fruity sharpness to it. Definitely a little bit of a kind of raisiny note in there. There's one or two kind of cakey elements in this beer as well, which I certainly like. You do get a little bit of that and almost kind of Christmas puddingy note to the beer. But yeah, definitely some figgy notes, a wee bit of a kind of black curranty, a more juicy black curranty note in it as well. But the fruits come across as having a little bit of a kind of, it's like a dried red fruity character you get with this beer. Black currants, figs, wee bit of a raisiny sharpness, a little bit of a cakey note in there, and potentially just a wee touch of a blackberry as well, maybe a bit of prune to be honest as well. But yeah, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of this one. This is quite unique, I think. Very first time I've come across a Kilchoman barrel aged beer, so I think I think I'm going to enjoy this one. You guys can watch along, but yeah, let's go for it then and see how we go. So yeah, this one is the 15th anniversary Imperial Russian Stout Kilchoman Islay Whiskey barrel aged from Brouwerij Emelisse in Hols in Zuid-Beveland in the southwest of the Netherlands. Let's get stuck into this one. Slanje, skål, cheers and prost. Ooh. Yeah, this kind of has a similar vibe to the last one that we had. Like I said, Scotch whisky barrels, they're very, very dominant in the flavour. This beer develops a dryness quite quickly, I have to say. This is definitely another one that's an acquired taste. You know, if you're not used to Scotch whisky barrels, what I would say to you immediately with this one, go for the bourbon barrel aged edition. If you're a barrel aging fan, go for the bourbon barrel aged edition. And if you want to get this one and try it for something a bit different, this is most definitely more of an acquired taste thing. And me being Scottish, I do love this kind of, I love, you know, smoky, peaty type meats and things like that. So the kind of dryness and peaty smoke that you get out of this is right up my street, this one. It's interesting as well because you couldn't smell so much of the kind of roasty toasty bitterness of this one in the aroma, but I said the same about the barley wine that we had. So I think what I probably need to do for my next Emelisse review is try and get something that's bourbon barrel aged and see what that's like. Or if there's you know, well, I guess if there's another Scotch whisky barrel that I'm interested in, I probably would go for that. Yeah, these guys certainly have a very interesting barrel program, but this is definitely another one that's kind of an acquired taste for sure. That if you are into the more kind of roasty, toasty, peaty side of Scotch whisky, this one will be right up your street as well. So yeah, I like this. I really do like this. Where to start then? This one's interesting because the backbone of the beer, normally of course you would expect the woodiness to be the backbone of the beer, but you can feel a bit of the kind of roasty, toasty black malt playing a role in this one as well. So you've kind of got a balance there in the very base of the beer. So the base of your tongue, we're talking middle third and back third of your palate here, by the way. You get that really nice kind of smooth, kind of woody character to this one. But sitting on top of that and mixing in with that, it almost feels like it's a kind of charred wood because I think you've got that roasty, toasty black malt kind of playing a role in there as well. One of the things with barrel aging, of course, is that you do sacrifice a little bit of the mouthfeel to get all these kind of infused flavours out of the beer. But yeah, this one is pretty damn nice actually. So yeah, you'll notice as you progress further into the aftertaste with this beer that the flavour in the middle of your palate, it really becomes dry and you get a lot of the kind of lovely peaty quality coming out of this beer. As was the case in the aroma, it's actually quite hard to pick out some of the more malty flavours in this because the beer dries out so quickly actually, and it leaves you that kind of charry, woody, peaty element in the middle of your tongue. That's the dominant flavour in this beer, 100%. So yeah, just beware of that. So let's focus on that middle third of your palate a little bit more. As I've said, you get the kind of woody base of the beer, then you get the roasty, toasty, kind of charred, black malty type thing sitting on top of that. If you go to the front half of that middle third of your palate, you can feel one or two little nutty notes in there, and I think there's a wee hint of a vanilla type quality to the beer as well in that sense. But let's focus on when the liquid's actually on our tongue, because that's when you're going to get most of these malty flavours. So yeah, when the liquid is on your tongue, you can definitely get a nice layer of a darker high cocoa chocolate, and as you usually get, there's a bit of a spectrum in that middle third of your palate. So in the back half of the middle third of your palate, it's a bit more of a kind of high 80 90% cocoa chocolate, you know, the more dark bitter chocolate. But as you move further forward, it kind of mellows out a little bit and moves towards a little bit more of a kind of a more you know, a kind of more milky chocolate, you know, sort of 60-70% cocoa. And then you do definitely get some brown sugary notes in this one as well. So let's do it again and have a look for that. So yeah, in the dead centre of your palate, you can feel a little bit of a treacly molasses sort of thing. It's certainly not the thickest of treacly molasses notes you're going to come across. But again, like I say, when you barrel age a beer, you sacrifice a bit of the mouthfeel to get all of these infused flavours. So I think that's maybe taken away a little bit from the kind of thickness of those brown sugary flavours. But certainly in the middle of your palate, there's like a circle sitting there right in the dead centre, and you can feel that oily brown sugary element from, you can feel that oily brown sugary element from the malty side of things. They're definitely that high treacle molasses sort of thing, highly caramelized treacle molasses sort of thing sitting there in the middle of the palate. But what's interesting about this beer, some of the chocolate does linger there, some of the brown sugar does linger there in the middle of the palate. The brown sugar, of course, will be covering up the booziness of this beer, which at 15% is considerable. But the thing that you really notice with this beer is that the middle of your palate just dries out, and this is when you start to get the peaty side of this whiskey coming out. You get that grassy, earthy, peaty dryness there in the middle of your palate. But the thing that's funny about the peat in this one is you can feel the citrusy element to it, and that's Kilchoman. Kilchoman is a, as I say, it's quite a peaty, well, it's quite a citrusy leaning whiskey, but it's still got that kind of classic Islay peaty character to it. So yeah, it's really interesting how this beer goes together. But as I say, this is definitely more of an acquired taste beer. This is very different from your kind of typical bourbon barrel aging. But I certainly like it, you know. But this one, as I say, if you're not too used to Scotch barrel aging, just be aware that you get a hell of a lot of pungency out of Scotch barrels in comparison to the American bourbons. Scotch whisky does have a little bit more of a kick to it for sure, but the bourbons, American bourbons, can be very, very nice. Of course, that's not to take away anything from them. But with barrel aging, yeah, you get a bit more bite out of the Scotch whisky barrels than you do the bourbon barrels for sure. But yeah, the thing you'll find as well is that once your palate adjusts to the beer a little bit more, it does kind of mellow out. It really does mellow out, and all these flavours kind of infuse into each other a little bit more. But yeah, this is definitely, when they're saying Russian Imperial Stout, it really does lean towards that kind of drier, more bitter thing. But you would expect that from this particular sub-style of stout, of course. There should be no qualms about that. But yeah, that's the middle third of your palate in this one. Let's focus on the other parts of the beer. So yeah, on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, there's a wee touch of a bready build up there again, a bit of a more bread crusty type thing. And then you can feel when you go into the back third of your palate, you can feel the kind of base of the beer, a lot more kind of well fired and bread crusty in a sense. And you know, you definitely get quite a lot of that out of the beer, which I really like. You can feel just a little touch of breadiness almost in that back third of your palate as well. But sitting on top of that, you get a more kind of airy quality to the beer. You can feel a little bit of the yeasty side of things coming out. So when you start at the back of the beer, you can feel the flavour is kind of like this, and then it condenses down a little bit as you move further forward. Then in that middle third of your palate, the flavours are kind of quite condensed together in a sense. So yeah, definitely a bit of the yeastiness coming out on the back third of your palate, but at the same time it feels a little bit more roasty and toasty and even more bitter on that back third of your palate. So yeah, I do like how this beer goes about its business on the barrel aging and the malty side of things. The hoppy side of the beer is pretty much as you would expect. Back corners of the palate, there is a good little bit of earthiness out of this one, but it comes across quite smooth. Again, the longer you let this beer sit, the more the hoppy character is going to drop out of it. But yeah, it's definitely got a nice little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, it does develop a little touch of a herbal quality, and as you reach the kind of front corners of the palate, it's got a little bit more of a kind of floral quality to it as well, which I really like. But yeah, it does actually, some of the hop actually, there's a part of the green, the more green component of the hop really kind of lingers there a little bit. So definitely some nice, as I say, floral aromaticity there, and round the front curve of the palate there is a little bit of a kind of grassy, citrusy note, which kind of goes in well with the slightly more citrusy, peaty character that you're getting out of the barrel aging side of the beer. So it's kind of an interesting wee parallel there to point out actually. But yeah, green component of the beer, definitely a nice wee touch of kind of grassy zestiness to the beer, which I think suits it. But yeah, let's focus on the front third of your palate then, and the fruity part of the beer. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again there's a wee touch of bready build-up, but quite a well-fired bread crusty dryness. The base of the front third of your palate as well, kind of smooth and toasty bread crusty elements too, which I think are quite nice. And sitting on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. What I would say though is that at the back of that front third of your palate, there's a wee bit of a kind of cakey note to the beer. I do get a wee bit of like a kind of toasty, chocolatey, brownie kind of thing there, or a bit of a kind of more bready note in a sense. So there's definitely something like something a wee bit more cakey or bready at the back of that front third of your palate. But let's focus on the fruity part of the beer. But yeah, sitting on top of that, there is a wee touch of a raisiny note when you take the beer in. But underneath that, yeah, for me, there's a bit of a kind of sultana, pruny type thing. There's a wee bit of a dried fruity character on that back half of the front third of your palate. But as you move further forward, you can feel a bit more of the, it starts to lean away from the prunes and move a little bit more to the kind of sultana type side of things. And then as you go into the front half of that front third of your palate, then it's a wee bit more kind of black curranty, and then there's just a little touch of, as you just reach the very kind of front tip of your tongue, I think there's a wee bit of a kind of more round, juicy blackberry quality coming out of it. But yeah, the fruity notes you get out of this one, for the most part, it's kind of cakey and dry, but then you can feel the sort of peaty, drier elements of the beer pushing forward into that fruity end of things. So just be aware of that. But this is a really, really interesting beer for me, this one. I think this is one of the kind of most quirky stouts I've come across in quite a wee while. But yeah, thumbs up to Brouwerij Emelisse for this. This one, it certainly ticks my boxes, but as I say, a bit of an acquired taste, so be aware of the power of Scotch barrel aging if you're going to go for this one for sure. And we've seen this already from Brouwerij Emelisse, so next time I need to get a bourbon barrel aged beer from them and just see what that's like. But yeah, I think this one has been a really interesting tasting experience. Let's round off the review with the mouthfeel then. So yeah, mouthfeel wise, it's kind of bottom end of full bodied for me. The carbonation is quite smooth. It's actually got a degree of slickness to it as well, which is quite interesting. It does have a good bit of dryness and bitterness to it though. I think this beer is definitely up there, you know, the sort of 90, 100 IBU kind of end of things, and it does get a bit drier the further you go into the aftertaste. Like I said, the malty side of things is quite smooth, but the malts and the barrel aging side of the beer are quite intertwined, and that gives you a lot of dryness. As I say, wee bit of sweetness and things. But yeah, I do like how this goes together. This is it's right up my street in that sense. There's a little bit of a kind of juicy fruitiness to it, but it gives you quite a dried kind of fruity quality as well. And there is a wee bit of hoppy character in this one still lingering there too. The citrusy side of the peat and the way that intertwines with the kind of grassy side of the hops for me is one of the more interesting parts of this beer. I think that's really quite quirky in a sense. But yeah, I think we can round off this review there. It certainly fits that RIS category quite well with the dryness and bitterness and things that it has. So thumbs up once again to Brouwerij Emelisse for this, and it's another solid Dutch beer. As I said, some really good things down there these days. But yeah, we can round off this review there then. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Make sure you check out the Beer Winkel in Leiden. Check out my friends at the Dutch Beer Collective. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brouwerij Emelisse, and if you do know any breweries that have got more Scotch barrel aged beers, then this would be really interesting to know. Cognac barrel aging, of course, is another very interesting thing that I want to explore a little bit more. But in the meantime, make sure you check out Brouwerij Emelisse from Hols in Beveland, in the southwest of the Netherlands. This one, it was the 15th anniversary Imperial Russian Stout, 15% ABV, Kilchoman, Islay, Kilchoman, pronounced it wrong, Kilchoman, Scotch Islay Whiskey Barrel Aged edition. This one, awesome beer. Slàinte, skull, cheers, and see you guys in the next review. Prost.